Hey folks, welcome back to the PropTech AI podcast. I'm Stuart Quintel, and this show is all about the people building practical modern businesses across property, PropTech, and AI. Today's guest is Mark Bernberg. He's the co-founder of Primax. Now, Primax describes itself as a platform that helps developers and agents move beyond guesswork by turning buyer behavior into meaningful, actionable insight. They're focused on helping project teams price, market, and sell developments more intelligently, with better visibility into what buyers actually want. Mark's also had a pretty interesting path into this space. He's founded a tech businesses before to spending the last decade in project sales. So look, Mark's really insightful, so this should be a really great conversation. Mark, great to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Stu. Thank you.
Look, starting from the beginning, what sort of first pulled you into property and why did the industry stick with you?
Yeah, I think like most things, I just landed there. I immigrated from South Africa to Australia. My wife's Australian. And after about 4 or 5 years here, I sold one of my tech companies early 2016 and was actually taking a bit of a break. A very good friend of mine was working in a project marketing company, and in a previous life in South Africa, I'd been a sales trainer. And he said, why don't you come in and do some sales training? You can't sit on the couch all day, eating Cocoa Pops and watching Netflix. And I went in to do some sales training, and 6 months later, I was sales director. And fast forward 10 years, and I'm still in project marketing. So I kind of fell into it. What I loved about it was it's quite difficult to sell projects. It's not like selling a residential house. If I was selling an actual residential home and Stu, you came into the home, I can have the candle burning. I can walk you through. You can, some people just fall in love with the space and this is their forever home. Whereas off the plan, most of the time it's either in a display suite, and that could be in a shopping center. And normally in the display suite, you can have a toilet or an example of a bathroom right next to the living room, which you would never have in an actual apartment. So it's very much about selling the illusion, selling the dream, selling the future. And I really resonated with that. And it takes a certain sales skill, and found myself really enjoying that. And that's how I ended up in project marketing. But I've always had a love and a passion and a real enthusiasm for tech, which is kind of how I found myself in PropTech.
When we caught up a couple of weeks ago, one thing that stood out was your frustration, I guess, with how off-plan projects have been sold for years. Landing pages, they've just got very little information. Like you say, they're selling the dream, some airy-fairy images, and then you're trying to push people into a display suite. What was, the moment that you stopped being just an annoyance and became, okay, where's the real business here?
Yeah, for sure. I don't know about you, but one of the things that frustrates the hell out of me is if you're doing some research online, and it could be a piece of software, and you look at either the top in the heading, or you scroll down to the footer and you're looking for pricing. And when you find it, it's like, POA, price on application, or hey, we'll be in touch, or why don't you book a demo? And I don't know about you, but that really frustrates me, because it's like, I just want to be able to understand, is this for me? Is it not for me? Is it within my ballpark? And traditionally, how projects are sold is very much around, put a landing page up, put as little information on the landing page as possible, beautiful renders, a little bit of information about the location, some information about the developer. And the whole aim is to drag people into a display suite where they're going to get strong-armed by, professional sales agents and project marketers. Now, I think, in the early days of social media and being able to do that, I think it worked really well. And I think these days, though, the way the internet's evolved, and particularly what COVID did, and what COVID really did was it drove a lot of the boomer generation and others onto the internet. I mean, even my mom, who had never done any online shopping ever, it was totally foreign to her. You go to a shop, you buy. She didn't have a choice. And so she ended up online, and suddenly she really enjoyed it, and she didn't have to deal with people. And now she does everything online. And so I think COVID was where I think the real tipping point started to happen of people got a lot more familiar with, I can do my research, I can shop online, I can understand, because you had to. And the moment for me was really, we were launching a really big project with a top tier, gold label developer who knows what they're doing, a lot of experience, premium brand. As the master agent at the time, we were very involved, prior to the launch, in helping set the price and determine not only the price, but the sequencing. And for those of you that are listening don't know what it means, in other words, what are we actually going to release on launch day? So if there's 100 apartments or 1,000 apartments even, you would never release all of them because it's too much choice. You would release a subset of that. So the question then is, what subset do you release and at what price? And I remember very, very clearly that there were 4 courtyard apartments. So there was a building A and a building B, and sort of 5 or 6 levels up, there was an opportunity where there were 4 courtyards between the 2 buildings. So 2 belonged to the apartments in building A and 2 belonged to the apartments in building B. And they were very unique. They were on the podium level. They were the only, big balconies, whereas the rest had little small balconies. And a lot of debate happened internally. What should we price? How should we, how much additional value should be added for these balconies? And at the time it was decided we're going to add $30,000 to the price. Doesn't matter what the price was. We're going to add $30,000 for each of these. Okay, great. We got to launch day. And again, for those of you listening, launch day is when we open the display suite. Everybody gets to come in and you can actually buy your apartment now. Within the first hour of opening, all 4 of those podium apartments were gone. And by the end of the launch weekend, so Saturday and Sunday, by the end of the weekend, we had about 10 buyers who had placed holding deposits down saying, Mark, if any of those 4 apartments become available, there's my holding deposit, I'm in. And it really was that aha moment of, how did we get to this point? How did we get to a point where, and it happens more often than you think, where a developer will release a building and come to launch day and the best stock sells out at the lowest possible price? Because when you launch a building, and quite often developers will launch buildings pre-construction, right? So they haven't even started building yet. And as the building goes through its construction phase, first they dig the hole, then the building comes out of the ground, then all the scaffolding goes up, then the formwork comes down, and eventually it tops out and you get OC. As it goes through those stages, you're going to get organic price rises anyway. And so a worst case scenario for a developer is that the most desirable apartments sell out on launch day, which is traditionally at the lowest possible price, because that's the incentive for you, Stuart, to come and buy an apartment on launch days. You're going to get a better price than if Mark comes 2 years later when the building's completed now. Mark gets more certainty because obviously it's a completed building and I can touch and feel it. Stuart got first mover advantage, and for taking the risk of an off the plan, you got a better price. And traditionally, this happens a lot. Developers launch, they don't really understand demand until it's too late. And when is it too late? When contracts are exchanged. And now what will happen is, they'll try and make up that lost gross revenue or GR. They'll try and make up that now on the rest of the apartments, which are sometimes, not always, but most of the time, your less desirable apartments. And so you have this downward spiral of now you're making the less desirable apartments more expensive, which makes them even less desirable, which slows down the sales even more. Sales agents get frustrated and despondent, and everything slows down, and it's just a downward spiral. And that was the moment where we realized, hang on, there's got to be a better way of doing this. And Primax literally was born from that launch, a very successful launch, and made a huge amount of sales. But we left so much money on the table.
And it was all during that time, I guess, through COVID, that that's when you and your business partner Sean sort of came together, wasn't it? And what sort of made you guys click?
It was a funny story. So obviously COVID, we were in lockdown as most of the world was. And I got 2 young kids at the time. I think they were 3 and 6. Impossible to keep 3 and 6-year-olds in a house locked up the whole time. We didn't have a very big garden. And they eventually burst out onto the street, as most of the kids in the streets did. And we just kept hearing about these 2 kids down the road. And, one night, months and months later, we ended up having sort of like a barbecue on the street where, everybody stood 2 meters apart with masks and kind of met each other, and ended up meeting the parents of these kids and realized that the dad had grown up in Cape Town in South Africa, where I'm from. He'd gone to high school 5 minutes away from me. We'd both gone to the University of Cape Town. We'd both worked at Investec as private bankers. And we just hit up an amazing friendship. He had just sold his software company to McKinsey & Co., the global consulting firm. He was now a partner in digital. And, we became very friendly. We had a very good connection, obviously a good history. And that was when slowly but surely I pitched him the idea. He was a software developer. And, I remember so clearly his first reaction was, because he'd worked on Amazon, he'd worked on bookings.com, and he'd even worked on Qantas, the Australian airline carrier. And he was like, sort of dynamic pricing, that must exist. Heat mapping, demand and intent, that must exist. And we did a lot of searching and we did a lot of looking, and it didn't exist. And so we built a prototype, an MVP, and I suppose the rest is history.
When, I guess, for people hearing about them Primax, like for the first time, if they're hearing about it for the first time on this show, how do you explain the core job that it does for a developer or a project team?
So we've got essentially 3 clients when it comes to Primax. The first would be the developer, first and foremost. And what we're doing for the developer is pure and simple. We are giving them an opportunity to maximize their GR, their gross revenue, and increase their profitability. And we do that by helping them understand at an individual apartment or lot level how to get more value out, but also how to sequence, so not to have all your best stock walk out the door early and have some of your best stock for later. And then also how to allocate your stock, because quite often developers will have internal sales team members who they pay a lower commission rate to, and third-party external real estate agencies, they call them channels, who they pay a much higher commission rate to because they have to bring their own buyers. And so we don't want the best stock being sold by the channels. You want the best stock being sold by your internal team where your cost of sale is lower. So primarily the product was built for developers, and we're all about improving their profitability by bringing them more GR than they thought they could get. But our second client is the sales agents. So from the project marketers and sales agencies, the level of detail about the buyer that we can now bring them means that they have a huge amount of understanding. So, traditionally, if you applied on one of the sites, they would get that Stuart, they'd get your mobile and your email, and you're interested in 2 beds. Well, there could be 26 types of 2 beds, bedrooms on either side, bedrooms together, island kitchens, L-shaped kitchens, media rooms, no media rooms, whatever. And whereas with Primax, they would understand that Stuart is interested in 704 and 1002 and, needs an island kitchen and has a budget of X and is really interested in living room sizes and needs a balcony, and north aspect is most important. Already the sales agents are getting so much more information to have a much warmer and what we call speed to lead, have a much quicker conversation with you and really get to the nitty gritty. And we're able to categorize leads by, those that are just browsing, those that are engaged, and then the high intent leads that you should really get to quickly. And then the third element obviously is the project marketers, the marketing teams, because we're able to understand, traditionally marketing teams will say to a developer or a sales team, okay, we've brought you 100 leads from Facebook, at a cost per lead of whatever it is, $50 or $100. We're able to rank each and every one of those 100 leads now by, are they browsers, engaged, or high intent? But we're also able to understand which creative they came from, which image, which message, and which campaign. And we're able to feed that back to the marketers so that they're able to get better lookalike audience, but also then understand how can they extract better intent out of Facebook by changing the ads and the messages to drag in more high intent buyers. And so those are the 3 core clients for Primax. But then for the end user, for you and me, Stu, if we're looking at apartments, the ability to be able to also sit and get a huge amount of information and find an apartment or 2 or 3 that we're very comfortable with, and then go into the display suite to go look at the finishes and get more details and hopefully move on to purchase.
Yeah. Some of the things you just said there around like helping the goal is to help the developers understand what will sell and at what price, and also the sequence as well. I guess what you're saying is it's a meaningful shift from now how projects still operate today. What do you think is wrong with the old model where it's leaking the most value?
Look, the biggest objection we get is the old school developer that goes, just let me get this right. You want me to put my pricing and my floor plans online. And the immediate sort of, how they then join the dots is, well, if we put everything online, no one's going to come to the display suite. So taking a step back there, the question we always put forward to developers is, okay, how many people are not coming to your display suite right now because you have no information online and they refuse to give you their details because they know they're going to get completely harassed by a sales agent. And right now they are only looking and they're not actually ready to buy yet. And so I think the big change is that consumers want information, and we're in an information age, right? With AI right now, you don't even Google things anymore. You just go to Perplexity or ChatGPT or Claude and go, tell me this. People want information and they want to be able to consume that information before making a decision. That's why you get Trustpilot and other review sites where people can really review and then go and buy. And all we are doing now is saying, hey, there's a lot of choice in a building. There's a lot of things to understand. Let people have the opportunity to explore a digital twin of the building. Those that are really interested are still coming in because people do want to touch and feel and look at the marble and see the finishes and look at the joinery and look at how the kitchen's laid out. But the difference now is that those that just want to browse can just browse and they don't need to be harassed. And also, even those that people are browsing, we're still giving the salespeople so much more information on what Stuart's actually done on the site that it also gives them the better ability that when they do proactively reach out to you via an EDM or even reaching out, they're reaching out with something that may be more pertinent to you or resonate with you better rather than the generic marketing floor plans and EDMs that ultimately become spam mail and forces that person to step even further back from the buying process. But it is a change and it is a difference. And, progressive developers have taken the platform, have taken it up really quickly. I suppose it's like anything. It's like AI, right? You must have mates who have yet to even use ChatGPT, or if they're using it, it's to get them to write an email. Yeah. Whereas, on the other side of the spectrum, you've got power users that have got OpenClaw and 17 MacBooks on their desk, running their whole life. It's the same with developers. You've got the progressive ones that can see the future and want the data because we get really good data from the consumer, but we give them information. So it's a real reciprocal relationship. And then you get the old school developers who are like, look, I've done this for 20 years. It's worked for me. And you can't argue with that because it has worked for them. So you just got to get onto the early adopter part of the curve and start there and work from there.
Yep. Speaking of the entrenched sort of behaviors with the old school or, the well-established developers, how have you been selling the innovation into a category that's been, do you focus on those sorts of customers that are quite resistant, or, have you been able to crack into their business if they have that sort of mindset?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've really, one of the things we've done is we've done a lot of webinars and we've done a lot of sort of face-to-face presentations where we've put the platform there and we've said, hey, look at this. This is something new. It's not going to be for everybody, but it's something new. What do you think? It's like when social ads first came out, people were so stuck on the property portals and they were like, what, you're going to advertise property on Instagram and Facebook? That's never going to work. My mother's on Facebook. She'll never look. Nowadays, there's more traction coming from social ads than there is from the property portals. So, again, what do? We put the new technology out there. We show the results. And at the same time, we also show the developers, look, you are going to put more information online, but look at what you get back and look at the heat mapping you get and being able to look at a side profile of your building and see which stacks and which levels and which apartments are resonating and how to adjust the pricing. And when a developer then uses the product, launches, and, for example, let's say it's a 100 apartment building and we show case studies of this, right? So it's 100 apartments, you're going to launch with 40, which is pretty standard. Yep. If we can help you on 10 of those 40 generate, let's say, another $500,000 in GR that you wouldn't have generated because you had a price and we've actually asked you to raise it. You can use some of that money, some of that 500,000, maybe 300,000 of it to go and discount another 10 apartments by 30 grand. And suddenly you've sold 20 apartments and you're still 200,000 up. Whereas traditionally, your best apartments would probably have gone, you would have sold 20, they would have been your best. You would probably have given incentive to get them off the ground. So you're minus 250,000 down and 20 of your best have now gone. Whereas in the scenario B, you've still sold 20, you're $200,000 up, and you've still got some of your best apartments waiting for later because we were able to show you, don't worry, those are going to sell anyway. And so I think once developers start to see that their sales team get way better information, and the sales team don't have to waste time phoning what we call looky-loos, who have no intent of buying. And all it is call after call after call after call, and no one's picking up the phone and no one's answering. Marketers get better information to be able to retarget smarter, create better lookalikes, and be able to bring more high-intent buyers to the table. And developers make more money from our platform. It's as simple as that. And for people out there that think developers make enough money already, they take a lot of risk. They take a lot of risk. I wouldn't be a developer. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't have I'd pass out. So, they take a lot of risk and they deserve the profit for taking that risk. And if we can help them be more profitable, that means they can build more buildings. That means they can make more housing available. I don't want to get all totally altruistic here because it's not Greenpeace, but, if a developer can be more profitable, they'll build more buildings. That means more residences for people to live in and hopefully, better lifestyle for all.
Yeah, I guess, as you say, they take a lot of risk and they're the ones, if they've got the gusto to make a profit, but especially in Australia, they've got the high rates, low margins, challenging construction industry,
Very.
So yeah, they're taking a lot of risk. When, like you sort of mentioned, like when you're presenting that to a client or pitching that to the client, what do they get? When do they start to go, this is actually working? Like when does the light bulb switch on in their mind and they actually go, hey, is it now my ability to optimize price, improve the release strategy, support the sales team better with data, or is it just giving the buyers a better experience? What actually clicks for those developers that you do?
Yeah, you actually
win over.
You summarized that really well, actually, better than I could. It's two things. It's one, when we show them the heat map. So think about a side profile view of the building. You've chopped the building in half, and we have from bright green to bright blue. Bright green being the best. This is going to really move quickly down to bright blue. And I think when they see that, and suddenly there is data now, and it's not subjective agents going, oh, we're getting so much heat on the two bedders. Yeah, no, we're getting so much heat. They can see now which stacks, which levels, which apartments, which typologies are generating more interest, but also early on can see where the problems are. And again, I think we've got to be clear on this. Really good developers are going to get 90 to 95% of their pricing spot on. It's the bell curve, right? It's the 5 to 10% on the outside. If we can move the margin on those, and where you thought you were going to do really well and it doesn't, help you alleviate that, or where you didn't think it was going to go well and we can get you more for that, that's where the true value comes in. So the heat map blows them out of the water because suddenly they get a visual. Everybody's visual, right? And a picture tells 1,000 words. So suddenly they go, wow, that looks really cool. And then the second big moment is then when we show them what their sales teams and the sales agents are going to get, whether they've spoken to that lead yet or not, the amount of data they've got. And it's those two moments that are light bulb moments. And they're like, okay, we got to try this. And you know, we've been lucky enough that everybody that's tried it has gone on to use it again, which shows us it's working. Yep. But it's those two moments that really resonate for them. You know, up till then, they're like, yeah, it sounds like a little new AI fad, but you know, two pictures kind of just makes the whole thing pop.
Nice. Well, getting onto the tech side then, like, you know, that the heat map side is really interesting, but also with Primax, it doesn't just show the listings differently. It tries to learn the buyer behavior, and you've mentioned that as well, giving the sales team more data, more signals. You know, what's most useful when someone is interacting with a project online?
So, and again, if any of my team are watching this, they're going to probably want to hack me to death because I'll butcher it, but it's really hardcore maths. So if you look at the Primax employee base, it's data scientists, double PhDs in advanced mathematics and machine learning. I mean, I really am by far and away the stupidest person in the room, but it's a lot of maths and everything's relative, right? So it's when you come online, you know, if Stuart's on apartment 504, really simplifying this down, it's what does Stuart do on apartment 504? Everybody else on apartment 504 relative to everybody else on the 5th floor. And if it's a 2-bedroom, relative to everybody else looking at 2 beds, relative to everybody else looking at the whole building. That advanced mathematics, and we screen record every single session, then we run machine learning over those screen recordings. You know, the nice thing with property is it's quite easy to take, you know, 100, 200, 300, 500 floor plans, annotate the floor plans up, you know, library, kitchen, powder room, et cetera, and then give it to a machine learning program and it can learn the floor plans and it learns what are similar, what are not similar, layouts, etc. And then what it's doing is it's watching the screen recordings of what did Stuart do online? Did you blow the plan up? Did you go look at the kitchen? Are you focusing on the storage areas? Is the media room most important to you? And then running machine learning over that to understand what area of the plan is most important. So we take all of that behavioral analytics and then we wrap that in advanced mathematics. Again, if I'm simplifying it, regression analysis, really trying to get it down to common factors. And then that is wrapped in what the developers call the fuzzy logic. And that is your machine learning and your generative AI. Our generative AI, and we're nervous about this. We don't like to call ourselves an AI company because everybody's an AI company right now. But we are using a lot of AI because we have a lot of data. But our generative AI is ultimately trying to predict at what price will an apartment sell and when. So if you take a basic graph, and you say, right, on the y-axis, it's price. On the x-axis, it's sales velocity, speed of sale. You know, the higher the price, the slower the sale. The lower the price, the faster the sale. We're looking for that Goldilocks zone and trying to understand, all right, at what price do we think something will sell and when, and ultimately then putting that forward and giving that prediction to the developer. So a lot of the stuff that powers Primax is advanced mathematics, machine learning, and generative AI.
Yeah, I mean, from what you described there, it's a big shift from what the industry normally does or traditionally does, which is just count the number of leads coming in on a landing page.
Yes, that's true.
My experience working for the portals as well, like that's what customers bought, that's what the business sold. Do you think, you know, the industry has been measuring the wrong things for too long?
I don't want to go and say that people have been doing things wrong. I just think that we're lucky that, you know, it's like, would Facebook, when it launched in, what was it, 2005 or 2007, would Facebook have worked in 1999? No, because the technology wasn't advanced for Facebook as a platform to exist. Without hardcore machine learning and generative AI, which is, call it, the last 5 to 10 years, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing right now. And so what we hear a lot from developers is, what you guys are being able to do in seconds, we used to run manually on spreadsheets and take 2 weeks to try and figure out. And as an example, before we launch a building, we simulated development's launch 1,000 times. Again, that's using Monte Carlo simulations, control theory, Bellman equations. So any of the mathematicians that are listening to this will understand how hardcore that is. It's a 3-day process, but we actually simulate the launch 1,000 times. You know, we take all the ROIs into account and a developer's IRR and what their pre-sales hurdles are and sales velocity. And so we're able to, where traditionally a developer might go, well, should we launch every second level? Sales team will say, well, let's launch with these expression of interest and maybe some of those and some of these, or let's keep the penthouse and ground floor off. And we simulate those launches and try and predict over a 12-month period what kind of GR and sales velocity could be achieved. And from there, we drop down a sequencing schedule to say, well, this probabilistically speaking is the best possible way to launch this building to get the momentum that every project marketing or off the plan project needs, as well as making sure you don't leave too much GR on the table. And I just think that traditionally there hasn't been the machine learning and the generative AI models to be able to allow some of the data points to be crunched to such a degree. People have had no choice but to work with more binary things like how many people asked for this floor plan, or how many EOIs do we have, or what's the sales agent saying are his or her top 10 most likely to sell, which again, very subjective, on launch day, and using those data points to try and come up with, an opinion of what the best way to run is. And I mean, there's a great quote by the former CEO of Netscape who says, if we have if we have the data, let's go with the data. If all we have is opinions, we're going with mine. And I think that is kind of where it was. And I think these days now, with the ability to crunch that kind of data, we're in a different world. And so we're very lucky and privileged to be able to take advantage of that advance in technology.
Speaking of like the technology, like what you just mentioned there, like sounds light years ahead of where the industry or some of the industry is still sitting. The fear at the moment is that tech will replace everything, I guess. But where do humans still really matter here?
Critically. I'm so glad you asked that question. One of the things we say to developers all the time is we are not looking to replace your display suite or your sales agents. I am of the belief, and I could be very, very wrong. People tell me that one day people are going to buy houses and apartments online like you buy a Tesla. I just can't see it. I just can't see a first-time buyer who is so nervous. It's the big, let's be honest, property is the biggest purchase most people, or the most debt most people go into in their lives, right? Even your car, if it's $100,000, doesn't compare with, $1, $2, $3 million that a property can cost you. I personally just can't see a world where en masse, and I know it does happen, and I've heard stories in Dubai of film stars are walking through a virtual reality and buying an apartment. I get it. They're a film star or an F1 racer. They don't have the time or the reason to go into public and get harassed and do that. But I think if you take a bell curve, I can't see 80%, the Pareto principle of people going, all right, I'm going to drop $2 million online by just clicking there and putting my credit card down for the deposit. I think that people like to explore, research, understand, and feel comfortable with a building, a developer, a product, a location. But I just feel that human element still needs to be there of, let me walk you through the display suite now, Stuart. Ask the questions. Let me see what's concerning you. Feel the marble. Open the drawer and close it and watch it slowly close and get that sort of tactile, kinesthetic touch and feel kind of vibe before you commit to such a big purchase. We're saying is you need the sales agents and you need the display suite. We are a data layer now that is going to make the display suite visit a warmer, more engaged, more educated experience. And we're going to give the sales agents a tool to be able to have a quicker, faster, more engaged conversation with a buyer because you already know so much about what they've ultimately been looking for. It's like, if you were a shoe salesman in the Nike shoe store and you're standing there and you're watching, and I come in and you watch me for 20 minutes, pick up one shoe, pick up another. After about 20 minutes, if I'm continuing there, you're going to have a reasonable idea that I'm not into the runners, I'm into the Jordan sneakers. So you're not going to start by saying, do you want to see the latest, Air Pegasus? You're going to show me that maybe the latest Air Jordan or Off-White Jordan, because you've already got that understanding and you've been watching me, kind of like that, and allowing a quicker and more intimate discussion to happen.
Where, I mean, that's a perfect anecdote there, like, the combination of AI and also traditional sort of sales process blending together. Where, zooming out a bit, like where do you think the biggest wins are going to be, like with AI and automation in project marketing and sales over the next few years?
I think the biggest wins are going to be by the people. And when I say people, I mean developers, marketers, and salespeople that adapt AI into their process in order to augment it. And I think those that embrace it and use it for what it's there for, to help and assist and either de-risk, demystify, or deconstruct elements of the process that then make it easier to get to the goal of either a sale or a better lead or a warmer appointment are going to be the winners. I don't think AI is now, and there might be a world in the future where Tesla's robots are in the display suite and you're buying from a robot. I don't know. Maybe that happens. But I also think that the people that are so nervous about AI, it's not about being nervous about AI. It's embracing AI and saying, okay, it's like the internet, right? When it first came out, I mean, my mom, classic example, she didn't want a bar of it. And I remember when payments first came out on the internet, my mom was like, this was the most foreign thing in the world to her, that you would put your credit card details online and what some hacker is going to steal it. Now she's buying left, right, and center with one touch click. And I think the winners in this in the future are going to be those companies, and that could be developers, that could be project marketers, it could be real estate agents, and even the end users that embrace AI and embrace what AI can do, which is ultimately shorten journeys, save you time, give you more information, and create a safer, more educated environment to make better and more strategic decisions. And that could be from the buyer side and from the seller side.
Yeah. Look, sort of closing this out, like how do you look at the industry now? Like, what do you think is changing for good, and what role do you see Primax in that industry?
What I see changing is, I think more transparency is coming, and I think it's needed. As an example, even Porsche now, you can actually go and build your Porsche online and they'll give you an estimated price. It was never there. It was always POA and you never knew what that Porsche was going to be. And I mean, if Porsche are doing it. So I think greater transparency is amazing. I think I'm quite excited about the advances in technology, particularly the really high-end sort of immersive experiences where you can explore. I think you're going to see more and more cross-border international purchases. People are buying in Dubai from Australia. There's a big drive at the moment. The Australian real estate agents are all going off to Dubai and trying to sell Dubai property to Australians. We talked about this last week. It's a big drive right now. But so I think you're going to see more and more of that. And where people can't physically come into a display suite, they are going to need to have some sort of way of exploring the product in a more tactile environment. And I think as we get advances in, goggles and glasses and things like that, I think that's really exciting. And I think that, Primax has a role to play in that by taking that behavior, whether it's on a static website or a 3D immersive experience, and taking the data points from that experience and translating those data points into an opportunity for a salesperson not to harass a browser because they can see they're a browser and therefore there's no point in harassing them, but being able to get to somebody that they genuinely can see wants more information and would love to have somebody reach out and speak to them. And I think that, buyers will benefit from that. Agents will benefit from that. And, smart developers that understand how to utilize this technology can also benefit from that. And I think Primax has a role to play in each one of those spaces, making more information available to you and me as buyers, and giving us the opportunity not to be harassed if we don't want to be. But then on this flip side of that, by giving us all of that information, also ensuring that the agents, marketers, and developers have access to that information so that A, they either don't harass us, or B, can reach out to us and have a more engaged conversation because they can genuinely see that we're actually very interested in exploring the product further.
Yep. I mean, like, Mark, this has been a fantastic conversation, and I could talk to you, a lot more about this because I understand the space that you're breaking into and you're disrupting. So where can people find and connect with you and learn more about Primax?
100%. Our website's a great place to start. That's primaxai.io, and come and find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the platform I'm most involved in. And you can just search my name, Mark Bernberg, and you'll find me there. And that'll also lead you to Primax. And, we'd love to have conversations with agents, with buyers, with project marketers. If you're curious to learn more, come and explore. And even if you think this is the worst thing ever and that we've opened Pandora's box, we'd love to hear that too, because, we like talking to the doubters too, because sometimes they give you a really good side. And, it's not always great just to hear everybody tell you how amazing things are. Yeah. Sometimes, when you hear what's not great, it allows you to be able to maybe fix, adapt, change, and see if you can get haters into lovers. Who knows?
I mean, Mark, again, thanks again. And like for our listeners, if you want to learn more about Primax, check them out online. I'll pop the details in the show notes. They are doing some really great smart work around the buyer behavior and the pricing strategy, and also helping developers and the project marketers and sales agents make better decisions because they're giving them more informed data points. Primax does say that they're redefining the property development space. And, from what I've seen and what I've heard and what you've listened to here from Mark, I believe they're on the right track and producing some really great work. Look, if you've enjoyed this episode, follow PropLink AI on the podcast on YouTube and Spotify. And I've got more conversations with great founders and operators in the PropTech world coming up. Thanks for listening.